My name is Darlise and welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to get into a case about a man who dressed up as Santa Claus in order to seek revenge on his wife. Now this case is very heartbreaking because not only did he show his wrath to his ex-wife, but 24 other people in her family. So without further ado, let's get into the case of Bruce Pardo, Bad Santa, and the Covina Massacre. So Bruce Pardo is going to be the man who dressed up as Santa Claus, and I really wanted to get into his background story, things that happened to him that may have been traumatic, but yet when you don't let things out, you don't seek counseling, you let things fester, I think that is what probably trickled down to the effect of the Covina Massacre. So let's get into Bruce Pardo, how he grew up, and what led to him acting out in such a horrendous way. So Bruce Jeffrey Pardo was born March 23rd, 1963. It is stated that his mom is Nancy Windsor, but there's no research about his father. Yet he did grow up very religious in the Roman Catholic Church. He graduated from John H. France Polytechnic High School in Sun Valley, and he did his undergraduate at California State University, Northridge, where he got a degree in engineering. Now, Bruce was considered one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He had this big smile, very expressive, a people person. He never showed signs of rage or violence, was always willing to help, and he was very active in his church. When it came to relationships with Bruce, he did have two major relationships in his lifetime that we know of. And with these relationships, we're going to see how the people person that Bruce is sometimes hindered him when it came to his relationships when confronting issues. In the early 2000s, Bruce began an on and off again relationship with Alina Lucano. And from their on and off again relationship, they were blessed to produce a child, Matthew. Unfortunately though, something horrific happened to Matthew. So one day, Alina went to the grocery store and Bruce was supposed to be watching their 13-month son, Matthew. Fortunately though, Bruce was holding Matthew because he was unconscious and immediately called 911 to get help. It was later found out that Matthew had accidentally drowned in the pool. And from him drowning in the pool, he suffered from long-term issues of brain damage and having to be put in a wheelchair. Now, while Matthew was in the hospital, Bruce was right by his side every single day. But the moment the doctor told him of Matthew's conditions, of the long-term therapy that Matthew would have to endure for the rest of his life, something in Bruce potentially snapped. He was no longer the same. His relationship with his son had turned. This traumatic event had ultimately made Bruce shut down to where he did not address the frustrations he was having, the guilt that he might have put on himself. Multiple family members stated that this really shattered Bruce to the core. So I want to know is, did this guilt play a long-term effect on his mental health? Did he ever seek counseling for what actually happened to Matthew? Did he understand the severity of how much having an impaired child would play on him in his relationships? And maybe Bruce blames himself for this mistake that he probably made, but ended up being a long-term consequence. So 6 months after Matthew's accident, Alina and Bruce's relationship pretty much deteriorated and ended. And not only was their relationship a breakup, Bruce potentially cut off his own son stopped communication, stopped visiting him. It's almost like he wanted to just break away from everything that he knew instead of addressing it and healing what happened. So instead of just coping with the pain, Bruce decided to run away. He cut off communication from Alina, and he broke off communication with his son Matthew and no longer visited him. What's even worse about it, Bruce did not want to help pay for the medical care for Matthew. It was estimated that within that first year, it was up to $340,000 just to take care of therapy and medical bills for Matthew. And Bruce just was not having it. Now, it's not like Bruce didn't have a successful career. He was an engineer. He was making a good amount of money. But I think that shows the character of Bruce, in which he was willing to cut everything off just to not address the actual traumatic event that happened. So Alina pretty much took him to court, which I think, in my opinion, she had every right. She ended up suing him so that he could help pay for medical bills, and she wanted to set up a special needs trust of just $240 a month for the rest of Matthew's life. This case was settled. So, like I said, by 2002, he pretty much had no communication with Matthew, with Alina at all. However, Bruce's mother, Nancy, still kept in communication. So 2 years after the accident and settlement of Matthew, he would jump right back into his last serious relationship. And even though this relationship did not work out, the notion of him cutting people out of his life would be an everlasting type of coping mechanism for Bruce that he would continue to. And I find it quite curious how in 2 years after something so traumatic happened to your firstborn child, your first son, you automatically jump into another relationship, which leads to marriage. Is it too soon to jump into another relationship? Is it too soon to not address a traumatic event and continue to act like nothing had ever happened to you before? Let me know what you all think. 2004, Bruce met Sylvia Orza, and by 2006, they were already walking down the aisle to get married. So Sylvia Orza was previously married and had 3 children. Unfortunately, the marriage ended due to her husband passing away in a car accident. So Sylvia had been a devoted employee to Jim Bodger Sun Seed Company for 5 years as well. Sylvia would be described as an honest, caring, loving person who truly valued honesty. So it came as a shock when Sylvia found out while Bruce was doing his taxes that he had been claiming a dependent on there. And she didn't even know that he had a dependent, much less a child. And so when it was revealed that Bruce, in fact, had a child named Matthew, but he did not have any communication with him, any type of relationship with him, much less when she found out that Matthew had been impaired, that had truly shattered her. The trust had been broken. She didn't even know who she was married to anymore. When you have children, they should be a part of your life. And Sylvia pretty much figured, if he didn't even tell me about his son, what else is he hiding from me? How could I be married to a man that would keep something like this from me? Not only was he holding this really big secret from her, but he did not want to share accounts with Sylvia. He did not want to take on the responsibility of her 3 children. And I think we see this reoccurring issue of he doesn't want to share his money with anyone. He doesn't want to have relationships or financial responsibility of children. And so Sylvia just had enough. And within a year, they had already started filing for divorce. And this divorce was very tumultuous. Neighbors had insinuated that Bruce even threw all of her belongings, her furniture, out on the front lawn, which left Sylvia pretty much staying back at her parents' house with her 3 children. And so I think it speaks to the measure of Bruce. Why didn't Bruce reveal that he had a child to Sylvia before he got married? Why didn't he explain the accident of Matthew? Why didn't he explain why he no longer has a relationship with his son? Do you think if Bruce had revealed about his son, they would have never got divorced? Maybe Sylvia could have helped him cope with the traumatic event. Maybe Sylvia could have introduced him and helped him. They could have both went to therapy to try to work this out. And it goes to show you that Bruce maybe thought if he didn't talk about his son, then it would just go away and it wouldn't be an issue of concern. But yet the situation of his son kept being brought up because he did not want to talk about it. Now, Bruce and Sylvia did try marriage counseling, but it was pretty much a donezo after that. After keeping a child as a secret, not only you're not caring for your impaired child, withholding accounts, not even taking care of responsibilities of the household, Sylvia had had enough. And I wonder why Bruce always kept his accounts secret. Was he always like that from the jump? Was this always a pattern of his? Did he not want to take care of Sylvia's children because of what happened to Matthew? Maybe he was scared an accident would happen to her 3 kids and he would be left with the responsibility and put in this very traumatic incident again. I wonder, were the mental health issues being addressed? And if he had expressed that, then could the marriage have been saved? So in June 2008, Bruce was ordered to pay Sylvia $1,785 a month in spousal support. But by July, he had ended up getting fired from his job as an engineer due to time fraud. So the spousal support was cut short, but the divorce settlement ended up being that Bruce had to pay outward $10,000 to Sylvia, and this left him enraged. Not only did Bruce have to pay $10,000, Sylvia ended up being able to keep their wedding ring, which could have been a money value, and also keep the family dog. Now, Bruce did not want to pay this $10,000 because he claimed that she was living with her parents, she wasn't paying rent, she was taking expensive trips to Las Vegas, she was going to fancy restaurants. What really ticked Bruce off the most was that his mother, Nancy, once again sided with his spouse. Nancy, Bruce's mother, was very empathetic towards Sylvia, kept in contact with her even after the divorce, and that just really ticked Bruce off. By December 18th, 2008, the divorce had been finalized. Pretty much Bruce had been taken to the cleaners and left to start over with no family, no job, no money. He was pretty much at his lowest point. So Bruce was resentful this Christmas time. And Bruce decided, you know what, I'm gonna dress up as Santa, but I'm not gonna bring good cheer at all. However, Sylvia would be spending time with her family, and Sylvia had a huge family of sisters, brothers, nieces, and nephews. A house of 25 people came together every year at her parents' house. The adults would be playing poker in the dining room. The children would be in the back playing video games. And it was just a wonderful time to be in the Orza house on Christmas Eve because it was full of love, family, and cheer. So by 11:30 p.m., the Orza family were in full swing of their Christmas Eve party, but they heard a ring at the doorbell. Sylvia's niece, an 8-year-old, ran to the door to see who it was. She noticed it was Santa in his big red suit, jolly, holding presents. However, Sylvia's niece did not know that it was actually Bruce dressed up as Santa, and those presents that were gift wrapped were actually a homemade flamethrower and weapons that would be lethal to everyone in the Orza family. So Sylvia's niece ran to the door and proceeded to open it to welcome Santa into the house on Christmas Eve. However, immediately once she opened that door, Bruce, Santa, immediately shot her in the face, which left the Orza family in turmoil. Immediately, Bruce started spraying everything that moved. First, Bruce hit Sylvia's brothers, James and Charles, first. Even though they had been shot, they were struggling for dear life to restrain him. Unfortunately, it did not work, and their life immediately ended. Bruce began to walk towards the dining room, where most of the family members were hiding. Bruce shot next at Sylvia's parents, Alicia and Joseph Orza. And even though there was so much turmoil, so much wreckage, Bruce did not stop to no avail. He went to look for Sylvia herself. Once he finally found his ex-wife Sylvia, he not only ended her life, but her sister's life. Now, Sylvia's last sister, Letitia, was able to run outside the house, as well as her 8-year-old who had opened the door for Bruce initially. They ran for safety to get help and called 911. However, Bruce was not done. He began to unwrap the gifts that he had brought in the house, poured gasoline on the first floor of the home, and began to torch the house. As the house was set on fire, it took 80 firefighters 1.5 hours just to take out the fire. The 25 people, 9 people would be killed and 3 injured, leaving many of the grandchildren orphans. As Bruce was setting the house on fire, his Santa suit began to melt, but due to his 2nd and 3rd degree burns, some of the Santa suit began to melt within his skin, leaving residue, leaving evidence that he was the one committing the crime. Bruce then escaped the house, drove 30 miles to his brother's home, even though his brother was not there. Once the brother showed up to the house, he noticed that Bruce was shot one single time because he had killed himself in the end. Now, Bruce had used a Dodge Caliber rental car as his getaway car, and he had parked it a block down from his brother's house. So when the police approached the car, they were very careful because they noticed that the Santa suit that was left in the car was a booby trap. If someone touched the Santa suit, it would immediately explode the entire car. What made Bruce snap to the point that not only did he take out his ex-wife's life, but affected 24 other people. Now, there are theories behind Bruce's motives for acting out such a horrendous event. And we'll never know, but these are speculations. Now, people believe not only was he going to act out the crime of Sylvia and her family, but he was also going to end his own mother's life. But due to the second and third degree burns that were so severe to his body, he was not able to do so. There was also speculation that he was trying to escape to Canada. He had actually bought flight tickets. However, people also believe that that was just to throw the whole investigation off if he actually was going to survive this. But here are the facts. Bruce had probably been suffering from mental health disorder. He probably did not know how to cope with traumatic event after traumatic event. He felt hopeless. He felt he had no other choice. And that's not to sympathize with Bruce at all, because there is no warrant to taking anyone's life. Bruce had also gotten involved with drugs. It is said, allegedly, that he had been having drug substances in his body. Covina Massacre will go down in history because we have a man who literally lost it all and felt that his only choice was to end his ex-wife's life, people that she loved, and take his own life. Mental health is so important, and we have to understand that during this time of the year, we need to love on our loved ones. We need to care about other people. If we feel lost, if we feel distressed, if we feel like we have nowhere to go, we need to talk to someone. We don't need to act out in this way, and we don't need this to happen again. With that being said, you guys, love you guys. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time.